Welcome to the Encounter Faith Podcast, everybody. My name is Ross, and dear listener, I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance because I don't know if I've ever had two guests who sound the closest to me on the episode, so we're going to try to speak very clearly so you know who I'm here with. I'm here with Max Schiewe. Hi, Max.
Hi. I will try my best not to emulate your voice, although it is difficult.
Yeah. And Collin Puckett. Hello, Collin.
Ross. I will also try to create a distinct voice.
Yeah. You can tell when Collin's talking because Collin has a joy to his life that Max and I are trying to aspire to. But I'm really excited to have this conversation because you two are the leaders of our student ministry here at Good Shepherd. And I say this a lot, dear listener, but I know many of you are part of this community, and I know that many of you are not. So just for context for that second group as we start, can you guys help folks understand, like, what's the scope of your ministry? What does being a part of Good Shepherd students look like? To help people understand your ministry first. Collin, let's start with you.
Yeah, so my ministry, I'm dealing with anybody in freshman to senior. That's my ministry. I'm seeing them from Thursday nights. I'm seeing them Sunday nights. Yeah. It's a big part of mine.
Yep.
Yeah, and then for me, and a lot of this, obviously Collin and I tag team together, but looking at middle school students coming out of elementary school, and I'm sending them off to high school and watching them go through high school. And so we just get the opportunity to create space for them in some very formative years, to give them room to bond with one another around this common uniting thing that is Jesus. So yeah, that's what we get to do. We get to walk with them. We get to have fun. And amidst all of the ridiculousness that is student ministry, we're really trying to give them a strong foundation spiritually and communally that they can take with them beyond, whenever we see them.
For sure. One of the things that I love about our student ministry here is the quality of relational investment that is obvious to me as someone who is parenting behind student ministry. My oldest is just now getting into the preteen years. Prayers appreciated, dear listener, but that's a separate conversation. But relationships seem to drive everything that you guys do. The curiosity that I have, in context, as folks are hearing this, they've heard from the mayor of Naperville, who's talked a lot about mental health in Naperville. They heard from Elizabeth Lecca, who pastors our families. She talked a lot about mental health and how that lives it out. And the goal for today is that you guys help our folks understand a little bit more of that practical kind of day-to-day, text message to text message conversation and what that looks like. There's one kind of specific caveat, though, that I want to mention at the start of this. Max, you were talking about this before we start. When we think about the conversation around mental health with the church, I think there's a misconception that a lot of folks bring into this conversation that you were hoping to correct specifically. But how do you help people understand what they can get from the church related to mental health and what ultimately is expected of them as a result?
Yeah, we recognize that mental health is a super salient issue at this point. I mean, even in the last 10 years when I was still in school, we'd have presenters come in and talk about mental health. I know it happens in the business world. It happens all over the place. The language we have about mental health is pretty widely understood and consistent at this point. So when you come to the church, you're not going to hear like an entirely new vantage point on mental health because a lot of that research has already been done and we get to play off of that and understand it. The most important thing that I want the listener to understand about the role of the church and how we deal with mental health is that it's founded on, like you said, relationship. It is easy maybe to look at the church and say, you know what, when I'm in a time of crisis, when there's something difficult going on, I can go to the church and get what I need and be better. Mm-hmm. But it's not always quite that simple.
Yeah.
We do certainly believe that in the church, in the body of Christ, there are things that each individual needs for their own flourishing. But it's difficult to help people walk that road if there's no relationship underlaying the foundation,
for sure,
if you will. Getting to know somebody's story, getting to know their family, what they care about, all of those things make it possible for us to better love as Jesus did.
Yeah.
By knowing people, by being able to care for them, rather than just offering some kind of generic advice that you could really hear anywhere else.
Sure. It's helpful for me to start there for a couple of reasons. Mostly, one of the things that I've appreciated the most in hosting these conversations is the way that the definition of mental health has kind of continued to be expanded each of these weeks. Because one of the things that you guys have the most proximity to, is probably the right way to say this, is folks who are functioning and in many cases flourishing while also having some level of a mental health diagnosis, whether that's anxiety or depression or even neuro differences. That's true for both of you. But Collin, I want to start with you. One of the things that stands out to me about your ministry in particular is you have said yes to coming alongside a group of teenagers where everyone likes to forget that middle school exists, but everyone is terrified of teenagers. Mm-hmm. You are clearly invigorated by that type of ministry. Can you help folks understand what it looks like for you on a like kid to kid or family to family level to carve out that space for relationships that Max is talking about?
I've never left like being a goofball teenager. Like I never phased out of that.
Sure.
Like
sure.
It's very cool. Like, so like relationally, it's like awesome to just be like, hey, what's your thoughts on this? Like, and to watch like a group of teenagers, like group think about like goofy ideas and stuff like that, which is relationship. Like, right. Like it's like getting to like goofball around with them and to just be like, oh, Colin's just like a bigger version of me. Like is how like, it's a joy to get to like be in that type of relationship with these guys that like, they're like, I enjoy being around Collin and Max, right? Like, it's like, we're like, these are one of the bros is how a lot of like the guys like treat us. And like that, like we're somebody that they can come to. Like, I think Max and I always open up our like, hey, like I'm never more than like a text away. I'm never more than a phone call. And like, it's the way that we build relationships is just getting to be goofy with them. Like, and I think that's huge because they're just like looking for somebody to listen to them. Like they're like a lot of like our high schoolers are like, I don't feel heard. I don't feel seen as who I am. And like, when we just get to just break the ice by being the biggest goofballs in the room, we get to like see them like open out of their shell, get to see them stretch into that.
So that brings up a question for me, Max, to kind of ping pong back and forth here. There's an important clarification, I think, literally to talk about how you guys manage that type of communication when it comes to minors. But I think the more substantive thing is also to describe how you manage those types of conversations with families. Because if you have a kid who's told you that they don't feel heard, the way that Elizabeth spoke about this is I'm on team, whatever the kid's name is. How do you have that conversation? Or maybe the right way to ask this question is, when is it the time to have that conversation to bring that family in, that in a way that is ultimately about the flourishing of that kid and the flourishing of the whole family?
So I want to say this. Yeah. When I approach situations like this, I'm always very clear with the student. Yeah. I'm never have I brought up these conversations and been like, I'm going to sneak around you and talk to your parents. It's always direct of, hey, I'm having this conversation as your advocate. I'm having this conversation with your parent because I care for you. Yeah. And it's always and it helps with what Max said about like, it's like, we're in a place of like, these are people that we relationally walk with. And that might like, because they open up generally after a couple times of being around and seeing, is this place safe? It is safe. I can now open up. And then they open up. And then when it's at that point where it's like, you're in a danger of yourself or others, etc., these hurts, then I'm being very clear of, hey, we need to talk to your parent because I care.
Yeah.
And it's a, hey, I will sit beside you if you want to be the one to take that step. A lot of our high schoolers are like, I want to be the one to open up this book because that's a mature move for me to make. But I'm always there to be the person who will sit in the room and ease tensions, because there's always the worry of the hammer of justice will come down upon me.
Right.
And almost always that's never the case. That's a lie told into our heads. That's a deception. And like, that's when like it's always through deep conversation, and it's always been fruitful in the situations where I've been in. It's always been fruitful.
That's good. Max, how would you answer that?
Yeah. I would kind of hit the same note and say, in the spirit of being relational with these families, there's no time that's too early to begin communicating with them.
That's good.
Amen.
Even before you get to the super deep, the super dark, the super serious, just having touch points. Like, hey, I've seen this in your student, this thing that I really appreciate. Or, hey, I'm so excited that you're here as a new family. Like, I'd love to get to know about your student and the things they feel and the things they need and the ways we can accommodate them. So having those conversations as early as possible, so that if you are in a place where you need to have something super serious, this isn't coming out of left field.
Yeah.
It's not out of the blue that the youth minister is sending an email to you.
Right.
This is a normal thing that we do, is communicate with our families about our kids. And so that's important. And at the same time, in that communication, the way we communicate, the spirit in which we communicate, we want that to be reflective of something better, something more like Jesus than what they experience elsewhere.
Sure.
Because everyone has their own different communities that they take part in. There's, the neighborhood gossip groups. There's like the other parents on your kids' travel sports teams. There's all these different places that you could go, and we want to present a vision that, no, this community here, the body of Jesus, is offering something better, something where there is true peace and comfort, something where you can seek out wisdom without judgment or stigma. That's what we want to make clear in how we approach our families, that this is not just a space that your student can come to and have a great time. This is a space for you to be ministered to as well.
That's good.
Real quick, that brings me to like my greatest joy is that like, because Max and I get to see such of like a transformative period of their lives, like we get to see them for like ideally, right, like 7 years, to get to like go to a parent and bring them like a surprise of like, hey, I've seen this transformation in my child. And they're like, wait, my child? My child who like literally like makes me want to tear my hair out. No, like your child, like we've talked like frequently to like one of the parents this past like couple weeks of like, hey, your daughter did an amazing job praying for the group.
That's
and
awesome.
Like wait, my daughter? Like it's like, and it's like, yeah, like we get to see like these cool, and to get the surprise parent shock of like, well, your child is doing great and amazing things, and you might not see that.
Well, and I think from a parenting perspective too, part of that is also because you are seeing your child every day in a very particular context. One of the things that I love about, obviously, like I said earlier, my kids are much younger, but having those types of interactions is you get to see the person that they're becoming independent of your influence because of your influence. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that you are taking those extra steps to connect those dots for parents, because I think it relates to where I wanted to go next. One of the things that I'm really mindful of is the community you're ministering to and the public perception of what that ministry looks like are often quite different. There's often some pretty big misconceptions. If I'm someone who maybe I had a good youth group experience many years ago, but I haven't, I've been afraid of teens ever since, or what have you. What is the biggest, use the word surprise, Colin? What is the biggest surprise that you've seen from a leader or a new family bringing someone into that ministry that goes against what folks' public perception of that might look like?
I would point to something that we just did last night. Last night, obviously, our final service of any kind in the worship center.
Dear listener, we're recording this the day after a pretty substantial change for our church.
That's right. So
of wrapping up 15 years of worship, of contemporary worship in one space, which will be moving to a different space. You can check the show notes wherever you're listening for more info about that.
Yeah, so we had some opportunity for our students to reflect last night and share some of the ways they've seen God work in a space that they have grown up in. And we gave them space to share some prayers about the future, about the people who would use that space after them. And so when public perception about the ministry is so like, oh, these guys are just event planners for my kids.
Right.
Like, oh, they've just got a space to goof off with a side of Jesus. No, when we passed the microphone around last night to our kids and got to hear them share the ways that God has transformed their hearts across years of being ministered to,
yeah,
I wish everybody listening and I wish everybody in our congregation could have been there for that moment.
Yeah.
Because then you wouldn't so easily write off youth ministry as just like, it's this thing that we do, but it's not really that important.
Yeah.
And we'd say, no, God is doing something and making remarkable transformations among our kids.
100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we fully expected like goofball answers. We fully expected that like half of the time we'd be reining in. I mean, I was shocked. I think like 90% to almost 100% was like serious. Like God moved in this, God changed my life. I mean, some like not as vocal, but like some were like, God saved my life.
Yeah.
And like, we were like, all right, God, like you're moving. What am I to like doubt?
Because part of the reality for your kids, you have a lot of kids in that room who are younger than 15, whose families worship in their contemporary worship here, who have literally been in that space their entire life. Yep. And what stands out to me about what you guys get to experience is we are so often able to, similar to the mental health conversation, assume that we either know the answers or that we are too ill-equipped to deal with whatever the problems are. And what I love is looking at something serious coming from a 14-year-old goes against both of those misconceptions. Because the 14-year-old you would expect not to be equipped, and you go like, oh no, actually you nailed it. You nailed it 100%. And your ministry provides so many different opportunities for that.
But I'll tell you the way we do that, Ross. The way that moment happens is not just like a one-off move of the Spirit. There's a consistency in the fact that we just ask them questions week in and week out.
Sure.
And they know they have the space to explain or to dig in. And when they say something, sometimes we'll follow up with, okay, what do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. And giving them the opportunity to speak things aloud and grow in their understanding as they speak has just bore such great fruit for us. Just standing in, asking questions. I'm not going to stand up on a Sunday night and just give you Max's theological and life advice to a bunch of 13-year-olds every week.
Sure.
But I'm going to engage with them.
But if you want to come by the office during the week, Max does do that on a pretty regular basis.
Yes, please visit me. I have office hours.
Nice.
But yeah, we stand in there and ask them questions and give them the space to work things out and explain them and learn how to articulate their thoughts. And that's how moments like that come to be. And I think there's wisdom in that, not only for a youth pastor, but for anybody listening who's engaging with the kids in your lives. Like, don't just cast your assumptions onto them. Hear what they have to say.
Yep.
Have them explain it out, see where they're coming from, ask more questions than you think you need to.
Yeah, because we talked about this a lot. Off mic, one of my favorite things about you guys is the ways in which you light up around a particular kid. Now, to be clear, part of that is just the structure of your ministry. You know, there are plenty of ministries where folks in your position don't have the ability to have that type of knowledge about individual kids like you do. But I want to be clear to anyone listening that Max and Colin take that responsibility and that privilege extremely seriously, because the way you guys talk about individual kids It's very obvious how well you know them, care for them, know their families, want to support them, want what's best for them. And I also think what's really cool is you guys have a very clear understanding of the importance of the work that the kind of work that you do in 2025. One of the things that the mayor talked about was he would lead his team. I've only talked to him once, but I think it would be very clear very important for me to say that he doesn't lead these workshops. His team would put together these workshop experiences that he was a part of. And they would ask the group of teenagers, how many of you have received a text or a message on Snapchat that was concerning? It was about a friend who was in a harmful position or was going to hurt themselves. And he said, I think I'm directly quoting, it's anecdotal to a certain extent, but every single time it was about 80%. And that's the kind of important work that you guys are in front of that is somewhat unique to even the youth ministry you experienced a decade ago, or certainly, the type of things that were true for me closer to 20 years ago now. What I'm curious about is in a situation like that, you guys are also either on that original message, or Colin, you said earlier, you're just a text message away. What does it look like to show up for a family in that space? Because, spoiler alert, dear listener, it's going to not be that different than what Max just said. Colin, when you get a text like that, the fruit of that is not born out of how good your text response is. It's out of those relationships. We'll walk people through the experiences that you've had like that.
Yeah. So, text messages that I can recall, it's less so, because in those situations, it almost always devolves into like a phone call.
Of course.
And then,
because it's more relational inherently.
It's more relational than a text. And
and usually the phone call starts with you saying, "Hey, where are you? Are you safe? Can I come by?
Are you safe? Are you okay? Can I come by?" I'm brought immediately to the immediately following parent conversation that happens in the in that relationship. I've had to dive in so much to the parents that I've talked to of, hey, you are parenting well.
Yeah.
Because everybody a lot of parents take on the weight of when I hear that my child is not doing well in this mental health world, it must be my fault. And I'm always encouraging our parents of and again, it takes that relational aspect that Max has talked about of knowing these families, but being able to say hey, you are doing a good job with your student. Mm-hmm. I've seen you parent, and I admire you as a parent of a younger child, that the way that I see you love on your kid is huge. And the care that I hear in your voice currently is huge. And to encourage them that it's this is not something that is isolated in this nurturing that you have given your child. But
sure, that's good.
The world is covering a lot of other areas in your child's life. You've got all these 8 hours in which you are not around your child during the day, and then add on whatever extracurriculars they got that are impacting your child's life, or brain chemistry, or fill in the blank.
Sure.
And it's I've loved getting to shoot out these encouragements, truths, and things that I've seen them do for their child of hey, we're going to walk through this together. And this is to the student too, that we're going to walk through this together. Safety is my number one priority. Are you safe? Do you have a plan?
Yeah.
Addressing those immediate urgencies. And then always how can I equip you to get the help that you need?
Mm. And those principles are true too if it's the friend in that hypothetical scenario that I laid out that's also reaching out to you.
Yep.
Because one of the things that stands out to me, particularly about your guys' ministry in our context, is you guys have a lot of friends in that scenario. You have a lot of people who maybe you're not directly ministering to the kid who's in crisis. Mm-hmm. But I would bet if you surveyed all your students, you'd have 80% or higher who have received that type of text. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think is important to clarify there is it goes back to Max, what you said about the role of the church versus what people bring into the church, because I think you guys get to experience why when anyone approaches church looking for a religious good or service, you wind up kind of only getting out of it what you put into it. But my hope is what the listeners heard talking through all this conversation around relationships. It's actually equipping for them to lean into the relationships of their church context, because that's how you have someone to talk to in those moments. That's how you have someone to talk to when you yourself are there, dear listener, regardless of what your age is. One of the things that I think is important to talk about in any conversation around mental health, particularly for students of any age, is the difference between our understanding of the digital world and the kids' understanding of the digital world. My frame of reference for this is always, I got a chance to talk to John Mark Comer when I worked at Awana, who's a pastor and speaker, and he lives in Portland, talks about his ministry in Portland. But he would tell a story about how he'd be teaching the Bible Belt and talking about post-Christendom and all these different things that John Mark Comer loves to talk about. Dear listener, if you know who John Mark Comer is. And the senior pastor would almost always come up to him and be like, man, that really stinks that that's what you're dealing with out in Portland, but we're not dealing with that here. And his response every time over the past 5 years has been, what do you think your youth minister would say? Because his point is essentially that all of our kids live in Portland now, given their phones and given the level of influence that the digital world has over their physical world reality. And I think that's an important thing that can't be overstated, because for even the three of us in the room, despite how young the two of you are, our phones are something we go to. It's not an extension of who we are. Can you help folks understand both the reality of what that's like for your kids, but also, I would argue, the opportunity that exists to, as you would say earlier, Max, like offer them a better story?
Yeah. So to one, I think the story that John Mark tells is really good, because anyone who thinks, well, that's not happening here, or that couldn't possibly happen with my kid, there's a level of, and I say this politely, but ignorance that goes into that.
Yeah.
Just knowing what the reality of the world is now. We often have our blinders up to the external factors that our kids are facing.
Yep.
And it's like, if I'm giving them the right kind of parenting in my home, then it's all going to turn out well. But like Colin said, there's so many other factors that are influencing them. Especially out in the western suburbs here, it is such a high pressure, high achievement kind of culture where every night of the week that we're not seeing them, they're in travel sports or school sports. They're in their extracurriculars. Some of them are doing college test prep. They're sending out applications and getting help writing their essays. And it's just constant. It never slows down. It never stops. And the means by which our kids evaluate how well they're doing in all these things that they care about,
yep,
that all takes place in the digital sphere.
Yep.
That becomes a tool of comparison to where these guys are on the varsity team that I wasn't able to make.
Yep.
Or this person is getting into this school on scholarship that I couldn't.
Yep.
And suddenly that becomes indicative of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we reduce our identities to. And so the better story that we want to tell, the aspect of the gospel that is so important for our kids to grasp, is that the gospel is not about what we do. Our identity in Christ is not measured by our achievement, but the greatest joy, the greatest security, the greatest peace a person can find begins with recognizing that you're not going to get there on your own. That there is another who stepped in your place so that you could have life and life abundantly, and so that you wouldn't have to do it all by yourself. But we don't want them to just understand that individually, because faith is not just an individual intellectual exercise. I'm drawn to the verse in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, part of Paul's introduction to the second letter. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God.
Yes.
For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ. And so it's not just wanting our kids each individually to feel good about themselves, but there's another aspect of faith that involves our mobilization. That if we understand that there is a God who loves us so deeply that he would lay himself down on our behalf so that we could have life and joy and peace, we want to bring that to other people. Not just through our words, but through our witness, through the way we speak, through the way we act, through the way we love, through the way we care. And that's part of what we try to embody on Sunday nights or any other night where we see our kids. This is what being someone who can comfort others looks like. This isn't just something you receive from us. The work of ministry cannot just be outsourced to church staff, but we're going to help guide you to a place where you can do that too, in your specific context, even when we're not right alongside you. We will be there to help guide you, but we want to equip you to be able to be that person who can not only feel the comfort of God, but bring it to whatever circle you inhabit.
So I heard a student testimony this past week, and in their testimony, they were very, very fresh, if even fresh is like maybe an understatement, in their faith, or barely on a start of their journey. And hearing and getting a text and receiving a text from a friend, so similar to what we've been talking about, and hearing that they had done all that they could, brought word to the parents. Again, we're not yet even in this group, but it brought everything to the parents, and then had like gotten off the phone and like was like, I'm gonna pray. Like it's like tangibly the last thing that they could do was all that's left is to throw it into God's hands, and was like, God, like I pray that you, if it's your will, save this person's life. And I think like that's like, as we've talked about, like it's like we are a place of we feel a lot of similarities to like what's going on in the rest of the world and a lot of like what's going on in the schools, but like a true difference that we have is that we can bring our concerns and we can bring our petitions to the Lord. And Max has hit that on the head frequently, but like I thought it was just a joy to hear that out of the mouth of somebody who is fresh in their faith, to hear that they have this deep understanding of, it's like, well, like even when I have like nothing left that I can do and it's out of my hands, I can put it into the hands of God. And like I think that was just a truth that I needed to hear this week of like how often am I bringing, like I'm bringing to the parents and I'm bringing to the students, but bringing it to God.
Thank you for listening to the Encounter Faith podcast. This podcast is a service of G. Shep Productions from Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Naperville, Illinois. All rights reserved. If you're in the area, we'd love to meet you on a Sunday morning at our 9 a.m. or 10:45 services. At Good Shepherd, we are inviting everyone to walk together in the calling of Christ for a life of eternal impact. This podcast is produced and hosted by me, Ross Cochran, and our theme song is Wake the Earth by 1111 Worship. Thank you for listening. We'll talk again soon.